America just got blindsided, not by Russia, not by China, but by Canada. In one single move worth $163 billion, Ottawa yanked the lever on America's most fragile lifeline: energy. Think about that. The neighbor we trust, the ally we depend on, just pulled the trigger on the strategy that could rewrite our economy overnight. Washington knows it, Wall Street fears it, but here's the part no one is telling ordinary Americans. This isn't just a policy shift. It's the fuse to blackouts, skyrocketing prices, and an economic chokehold that will squeeze every household in the country. And the worst part? It's already happening in silence. Let's start with the hard number: 21%. That's how much of Canada's total global exports goes straight into the United States, and the majority of that is energy. Oil, gas, electricity, uranium, lifelines that power American cars, factories, homes. Which means when Canada sneezes, the US energy grid catches a fever. For decades, Washington brushed this off. Canada was the friendly neighbor, the stable partner, the quiet supplier. Unlike the Middle East, no coups. Unlike Russia, no invasions. Unlike Venezuela, no sanctions drama. Canada was boring, safe, reliable. But boring suppliers don't stay boring forever. And when billions are on the line, even allies play hardball. So what just happened? Canada announced a sweeping strategy worth roughly $163 billion in direct energy leverage to tighten exports, redirect flows toward Europe and Asia, and demand higher bargaining power from Washington. Translation: Canada is no longer content to be America's gas station. It wants to be a global energy broker. And if that means squeezing the US, so be it. Why now? Two reasons. First, the green transition. As the US pushes renewable energy, Canada fears its oil sands and pipelines will get sidelined. So Ottawa is cashing in now, extracting maximum profit before the window closes. Second, geopolitics. With Europe desperate to replace Russian gas, Canada sees leverage it's never had before. If Berlin and Paris will pay more, why should Ottawa sell cheap to Washington? Here's the strange part. No White House press conference, no fiery speeches, just silence. Because admitting this dependency out loud would spark panic in markets, expose US weakness, and give Canada even more leverage. Behind closed doors, though, Washington is scrambling. Officials know that America's so-called energy independence is a half-truth. The US still imports millions of barrels daily, and Canada is the #1 supplier. If Canada tilts the balance even slightly, redirecting flows, hiking prices, slowing exports, the ripple hits immediately. Gasoline spikes, electricity grids strain, factories pay more to keep machines running. Remember the slogans: drill baby drill, energy dominance, American energy independence. They sound good, but here's the hidden contradiction. The US consumes more than it produces in key categories. Crude oil imports, Canada fills the gap. Uranium for nuclear plants, Canada again. Even hydroelectricity flows south from Quebec into New York and New England. So while politicians claim independence, the grid quietly leans on Canada's pipelines and power lines. That's the dependency Canada just turned into a weapon. Why does 163B matter? Because that's not just an abstract budget line. It's leverage Canada can pull overnight. Imagine a chess match where one side controls the queen, the rooks, and the bishops, and the other side pretends it's fine because it still has pawns. That's Washington right now.
Canada can raise export taxes, slow shipments, or threaten redirection to Europe. It doesn't need to cut off America, just hint at alternatives, and instantly Washington loses bargaining power. Here's where it gets visceral. This isn't about abstract geopolitics, it's about you. Every truckload of goods that needs diesel, every plane ticket tied to jet fuel, every food shipment chilled by electricity, all of it gets more expensive when Canada flexes its muscles. Prices rise, paychecks shrink, jobs disappear. Energy is the backbone of everything, and when Canada pulls on that backbone, the entire US economy feels the strain. We're already seeing it. Prices of gasoline in the Midwest creeping upward. Utility companies in the Northeast warning of tighter supply. Industrial plants whispering about higher costs. None of this is in headlines yet, but it's moving. like a pressure cooker building heat before the whistle blows. And here's the kicker. Canada doesn't even have to act aggressively. The mere announcement of this $163 billion strategy has already shifted global markets. Futures traders are betting on higher prices. European negotiators are circling Canadian suppliers. Wall Street smells volatility. For Americans, this feels like a betrayal. Canada was supposed to be the steady neighbor, the ally that never wavered. Instead, Ottawa is playing power politics, and Washington, so used to lecturing the world, suddenly looks cornered. Think about the irony. America spends trillions to secure energy halfway across the globe, from Saudi Arabia to Iraq, but gets blindsided by the country that shares its longest border. To be fair, the warnings were there. Analysts flagged years ago that over-reliance on Canadian oil sands and hydro was risky. Environmentalists pointed out that the U.S. never invested enough in diversification. Economists warned about putting too many eggs in Canada's basket.
But politicians ignored it. Why? Because dependency on Canada was invisible to voters. No terror attacks, no oil embargoes, no scary headlines. Just quiet pipelines flowing south. Until now. And this is just the first phase. The $163 billion strategy is the opening shot, not the end game. The real consequences, the global ripple effects, the hidden alliances, the scenarios no one in Washington dares to say out loud, those come next. The $163 billion shock isn't just an economic story. It's a geopolitical earthquake, and the aftershocks are spreading faster than Washington can contain. Let's start with Europe. Since Russia's invasion of Ukraine, Europe has scrambled to replace its gas supply. Billions poured into LNG terminals, pipelines rerouted, emergency deals signed. But the math never added up. Europe still needed a reliable long-term supplier. That's where Canada stepped in. Ottawa knows Berlin and Paris will pay premium prices, and every barrel Canada sells to Europe is one less flowing south to America. Imagine the optics. While American families face rising utility bills, Canadian tankers sail east, cashing in on Europe's desperation. Now look to Asia, Japan, South Korea, even India, all desperate for diversified energy sources. If Canada courts them too, America faces a double squeeze: higher global competition and reduced domestic flow. Washington's leverage evaporates as Ottawa becomes the global broker. And here's the curveball. Canada may be America's ally, but markets don't care about friendships. If BRICS nations, China, India, Brazil, wave enough cash, Canadian energy will find its way into their pipelines too. That flips the strategic script. Instead of being America's quiet supplier, Canada could end up fueling America's rivals, and Washington would be powerless to stop it.
So, what can the U.S. do? Let's break it down. Diversify imports, turn to Mexico, Venezuela, even the Middle East again, but each option comes with instability, politics, or hostile governments. Boost domestic output, drill more, frack more, expand renewables, but scaling that takes years, not months. Pressure Canada politically, trade threats, tariff retaliation, defense bargaining, but that risks blowing up one of the most stable alliances in U.S. history. Strategic reserves, tap emergency oil reserves, but those are finite, and markets see through it fast. None of these options solve the core problem. America's energy backbone is tied to a neighbor it can't control. Now layer in America's $34 trillion debt. Higher energy prices mean higher inflation. Higher inflation means higher interest rates, and higher rates mean Washington borrows even more just to keep the lights on. Canada's $163 billion play isn't just an energy problem, it's a debt accelerator. Every household bill that rises pushes the entire economy deeper into fiscal quicksand. Here's what no one in Washington wants to say out loud. Modern warfare runs on fuel. Tanks, planes, ships, none of it moves without steady supply. If Canada throttles flow even slightly, U.S. military readiness takes a hit. Think about that. The world's superpower forced to ration because its northern neighbor holds the tap. That's not just economics, that's national security. So what does this mean for you? Gas stations charging $1 or $2 more per gallon, utility bills rising 20 to 30% in winter, groceries and goods spiking as transport costs soar, factories slowing or closing as input costs climb, jobs vanishing as industries shrink. It's not abstract, it's daily life. Every paycheck, every bill, every job tied to a Canadian decision you don't get to vote on.
And here's another layer. For decades, America sold the image of independence, dominance, self-sufficiency. Now, the revelation that even Canada can hold America hostage delivers a psychological gut punch. It exposes fragility, vulnerability, a superpower caught off guard not by enemies, but by allies. Let's lay out the possible futures. Escalation. Canada leans harder into Europe and Asia, cutting US share. Prices surge, Washington retaliates with trade fights. The alliance fractures. Negotiation. Behind closed doors, Washington offers concessions, trade deals, defense perks, policy adjustments to keep energy flowing. Ottawa gains leverage permanently. Crisis, a sudden shock, harsh winter, global supply crunch, pipeline disruption, blackouts spread, industries halt. Americans wake up to a dependency they never knew they had. Transition, the US races to accelerate renewables, LNG, and domestic production, but the transition will be messy, costly, and years too late. In every scenario, America loses some degree of control. And here's the heart of it. Washington won't say the quiet part out loud, that the US is not fully energy independent, that a neighbor's $163 billion strategy can shake the entire economy, that blackouts and price shocks aren't science fiction, they're one decision away. Admitting it would trigger panic, denying it buys time, but the truth is already unfolding. So as headlines talk about foreign wars, global summits, or partisan fights, remember this: the biggest shock to America's future didn't come from an enemy. It came from the country next door. Canada just proved that power isn't only about missiles or money, sometimes it's about pipelines, grids, and silent leverage. And tonight, America finds itself cornered, not by force, but by dependence. The question now isn't whether Washington will admit it, the question is how long ordinary Americans can afford to ignore it.